Hey there, this is Aman. So, in this video, I'm going to share some of my knowledge about the valuation of the companies. So, this will be the part one of the series Know the Valuation. So, let's get started without wasting any time. Evaluation. Evaluation is a tool that gives you the power to know the intrinsic value or the real value of the assets. Doing valuation is like cooking food. You cannot learn it by reading books or watching videos. You have to cook it by yourself. As you start cooking and becoming good at some types of food, just like that, in a valuation, you can be good at some kind of valuation and same time terrible at others. For instance, you can be good at valuing mature company, and at the same time you can be bad at new age technology company. But the problem with the valuation is that it is mostly biased. However, if you do it in the right way, you can overcome this problem. So let's see some of the myths about the valuation. First, since valuation models are quantitative, valuation is objective. No, the value of an asset varies from analyst to analyst because every analyst has his own experience to value and his own knowledge to value a company. So it varies from analyst to analyst. A well researched and well done valuation is timeless. No, it cannot be timeless. You have to change the parameter according to the changing environment. Third one, a good valuation provides a precise estimation of value. No, one can value the asset precisely because of two reasons. First is you will never know the future unpublic plans of the companies legally, and other is certain uncertainty of the future. For instance, let's assume just before 1 month of COVID 19, you are valuing the hotel business and you come up with an intrinsic value of rupees 100 per share. But due to worldwide lockdowns, hotel business impacts very badly. So, do your valuation. Fourth one, more quantitative a model of valuation, the better the valuation. No, it is not the case in valuation. You have to link your quantitative valuation to a reliable a possible story that will unfold in the future. And the last one, the final value of valuation is what matters. The process of it is not important. No, this is also not a uh, it is also a myth about the valuation. The method of accounting also matters a lot in the process of the valuation. So let's proceed to the types of valuation. First one, DCF valuation. A discounted cash flow valuation is the most popular valuation method. It is the present value of all expected free cash flows of the business. This method is almost can use in any types of business or sector with some variation. The second one is relative valuation. Unlike discounted cash flow valuation, which is a search for intrinsic value, relative valuation relies much more on the market being right. In other words, we assume that the market is correct in the way it prices stock on average, but it makes error in the pricing of individual stocks. We also assume that a comparison of multiples will allow us to identify these errors and that these errors will be corrected over the time. The third one, contingent claim valuation. Contingent means accidental. This method is about the occurrence of an event that will shape the free cash flows of the business. For instance, pharmaceutical companies' cash flows highly depend on the approval of the patents. In other words, you can quantify the occurrence of the event of patent approved in the evaluation. Now we will dive into DCF valuation as it is the most useful among the three. So let's start. As I mentioned earlier, in simple words, DCF valuation is the present value of all cash flows that can be freely used by the company. We can calculate free cash flow in two ways. First one is free cash flows to the firm, and the other is free cash flows to equity. Free cash flows to firm. The value of the firm is obtained by discounting expected cash flows to the firm. For example, the residual cash flows after meeting all operating expenses, reinvestment needs, and tax, but before any payment to either debt or equity holders at the weighted average cost of capital, which is the cost of the different components of financing used by the company, weighted by their market value proportion. The second one, free cash flow to equity. The value of equity is obtained by discounting expected cash flows to equity. For example, the residual cash flows after meeting all expenses, reinvestment needs, tax obligation, and interest and principal payments at the cost of equity. The rate cost of equity, the rate of return required by equity investor in the firms. So you can see here the formula of the equity valuation and firm valuation. So let's talk about some weak spots of DCF valuation. First one, firms in trouble. A distressed firm generally has negative earnings and cash flows and expects to lose money for some time in the future. For these firms, estimating future cash flows is difficult to do since there is a strong probability of bankruptcy and uncertainty about future cash flows. The second one, cyclical firms. The earning and cash flows of cyclical firms tend to follow the economy, rising during economic boom and failing during recession. If discounted cash flow valuation is used on these firms, expected future cash flows are usually smoothed out unless the analyst wants to undertake the task of predicting the time and duration of economic recession and recoveries. For an other one, firms with unutilized assets. Discounted cash flow valuation reflects the value of all assets that produce cash flows. If a firm has assets that are unutilized and hence don't produce any cash flows, the value of these assets will not be reflected in the value obtained from discounting expected future cash flows. Firm with patent or product option. Firms sometimes have unutilized patents or license that don't produce any current cash flows and are not expected to produce the cash flows shortly, but are valuable nevertheless. If this is the case, the value obtained from discounting expected cash flows to the firm will understate the true value of the firm. Firms in the process of restructuring. Firms in the process of restructuring often sell some of their assets, acquiring other assets, and change their capital structure and dividend policies. Some of them also change their ownership structure, going from publicly traded to private status and vice versa, and management compensation schemes. Each of these changes makes estimating future cash flows more difficult and affects the riskiness of the firm. Firms involved in acquisition. There are at least two specific issues relating to acquisition that need to be taken into account when using discounted cash flow valuation model to value target firms. The first is the thorny one of whether there is a synergy in the merger, or how its valuation can be, how its value can be estimated. The second, especially in hostile takeovers like Twitter, it is the effect of changing management on cash flow and risk. So that's it all from my side. Thank you so much guys for listening me.